June 7th, 2024, noon. I stood on the front porch of 1247 Ridgeview Drive with 2 suitcases and a cardboard box containing my wife's ashes. The house behind me, the house Kathleen and I had bought 29 years ago, was no longer mine. At least, that's what my daughter had just told me. The June sun beat down on my neck, sweat pooled under my collar. I couldn't remember if I'd packed my blood pressure medication, couldn't remember much of anything from the past 6 hours, honestly, except the look on Courtney's face when she delivered the news. "I'm sorry, Dad, but you need to leave." My neighbor Frank Cooper came out of his house across the street, squinting against the glare. He was 70, retired from the fire department, and had lived on this block even longer than Kathleen and I had. "Demetrio?" He crossed the lawn toward me. "What the hell's going on?" I tried to answer. My throat closed up. Frank took one look at my face, at the suitcases, at the urn in my shaking hands and said, "Come on, you're staying with us." 6 hours earlier, 8:30 a.m. The doorbell rang while I was making coffee, Kathleen's French press, the one she'd insisted on using every morning for 15 years. I'd been going through the motions, boil water, grind beans, pour, wait, because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant remembering she was gone. 2 months. She'd been dead exactly 2 months. I opened the door expecting a package. Instead, I found my daughter standing on the porch with her husband's family. Courtney was 31, thin, dressed in a gray business suit despite it being Saturday. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Behind her stood Kyle Brennan, her husband of 6 years, his hand possessive on her shoulder. And behind him, like generals surveying conquered territory, stood Richard and Patricia Brennan. Richard was 66, broad-shouldered, silver-haired, wearing what I'd learned to recognize as his closing deal smile. Patricia clutched a leather handbag worth more than my car, her manicured nails drumming against it nervously. "Dad," Courtney said, her voice came out flat, rehearsed. "We need to talk." Something in my chest tightened. "What's wrong?" "May we come in?" Richard didn't wait for an answer. He walked past me into my living room like he owned the place. I looked at Courtney. Really looked at her. Dark circles under her eyes. Weight loss I'd been trying not to notice, the way she held herself, shoulders hunched, making herself smaller. "Courtney, what's going on?" She finally met my eyes. What I saw there, guilt, fear, desperation, made my blood run cold. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Richard positioned himself by the fireplace, the same spot where Kathleen's urn had sat during the wake. He looked around the living room with an appraising eye, like a real estate agent calculating square footage. "Demetrio," he said, turning to face me, "I'm going to be direct. This is difficult for everyone, especially Courtney, but it needs to be done." "What needs to be done?" He pulled a folded document from his jacket pocket. "This house now belongs to my family. We're asking you to vacate the premises by noon today." The words didn't make sense. I looked at Courtney. She was staring at the floor, tears running down her face, not making a sound. "I don't understand," I said. "Your late wife left a will." Richard unfolded the papers. "Everything goes to Courtney. The house, the savings, Kathleen's car, all of it." "That's not possible." "I'm afraid it is." He held out the document. I took it with numb fingers. Last will and testament of Kathleen Morrison Thomas, dated April 10th, 2024, 9 days before she died. There was her signature at the bottom, shaky but recognizable. A notary seal. Legal language I couldn't focus on. "Kathleen would have told me," I said. "We talked about wills when she got diagnosed. She said we didn't need to rush. The heart attack came too fast." Apparently she made time. Patricia's voice was sharp. "And really, Demetrio, this house is too much for a man your age. All these stairs, the maintenance. We're doing you a favor." "A favor?" The word came out strangled. "We'll help you find an apartment," Richard said smoothly. "Something manageable. 1 bedroom, maybe a nice assisted living community. You're 62. It's time to simplify." I looked at the will again. The language was clear enough. "I, Kathleen Morrison Thomas, being of sound mind, do hereby bequeath all my worldly possessions to my daughter, Courtney Thomas Brennan." But something was wrong. Kathleen wouldn't do this. Not without telling me, not after 29 years of marriage. "I need to call a lawyer," I said. "By all means." Richard checked his Rolex. But the will has been filed with probate court. Everything is in order, and you still need to be out by noon. That's 3.5 hours. Courtney. I ignored Richard, focused on my daughter. Please, this is your mother's house. You grew up here. I don't understand. I know. Her voice cracked. For a moment, I thought she might break, might tell me what was really happening. Then, Kyle's hand tightened on her shoulder, and whatever light I'd seen in her eyes went out. I'm sorry, Dad. It's already done. 2 months earlier, April the 19th, 3:47 a.m. Kathleen died in room 412 of Denver General Hospital while I held her hand. The heart attack had come fast. She'd been in the garden planting basil and rosemary, her spring ritual, when she'd collapsed. Our neighbor Frank had called 911. By the time I got to the hospital, she was intubated, machines breathing for her. Dr. Rebecca Walsh, her cardiologist, met me in the hallway. Her heart is failing, Demetrio. The damage is extensive. We're doing everything we can, but you should prepare yourself. How long? Hours? Maybe a day if we're lucky. Kathleen woke up that afternoon. They'd taken the breathing tube out. Her voice was weak, but her mind was sharp. Scott made it from Boulder in time. Our son sat on one side of the bed, I sat on the other. Kathleen talked to him about his teaching, made him promise to keep fighting for his students, the ones from broken homes who reminded her of kids she'd helped at the library. Then she asked to see Courtney alone. I waited in the hallway, watching through the window as Kathleen held our daughter's hand and spoke urgently. Courtney was crying, nodding, her whole body shaking. The conversation lasted 30 minutes. When Courtney came out, her face was splotchy, her hands trembling. What did she say? I asked. Courtney shook her head. She said she loves us, that she's so proud of who we are. That night, Kathleen pulled me close. We were alone. The nurses had dimmed the lights. Thomas, she whispered. She only called me by my last name when something was serious. Listen to me carefully. Don't talk like this. You're going to... I don't have much time. Her fingers dug into my arm with surprising strength. You need to protect our children. Promise me, whatever happens, protect Scott and Courtney, especially Courtney. I will, I promise, but there are things... She coughed, the monitor beeping frantically. Important documents. If anything happens to me, look for... A nurse rushed in. Kathleen's heart was failing. They pushed me out of the room. I stood helpless while they tried to save her. She died at 3:47 a.m. The official cause, sudden cardiac arrest due to congestive heart failure. April 25th. 200 people came to Kathleen's funeral. She'd been head librarian at Denver Public Library for 20 years. Everyone loved her. Richard Brennan gave a eulogy. He talked about how Kathleen had welcomed him into the family, how she'd been a wonderful mother-in-law to Kyle, how family takes care of family. I barely heard him. I was watching Courtney. She sat in the front pew between Kyle and Patricia, crying into a tissue. But every few minutes her phone would buzz. She'd glance at it. Her crying would stop. She'd text something back. Then the crying would resume. Kyle kept his arm around her the whole time. To anyone else it looked supportive. But I saw how his fingers pressed into her shoulder, how she'd flinch slightly, then force herself to relax. After the service, people came up to offer condolences. Richard shook my hand firmly. If you need anything, Demetrio, anything at all, you let us know. Family takes care of family. At the time, I'd thought it was kindness. Now, standing in my living room with his eviction notice, I understood it was a threat. I spent 2 hours packing in a fog. Clothes into the suitcases, medications, Kathleen's urn, wrapped carefully in a sweater. Everything else, furniture, photos, 30 years of our life together, I left behind. At 11:55, I stood on the porch with my belongings. Richard was already having the locks changed. A locksmith's van sat in the driveway. Frank's guest room was small but clean. He and his wife Martha made up the bed with fresh sheets, didn't ask questions, just let me exist in my grief and shock. That evening, I finally read the will carefully. I, Kathleen Morrison Thomas, being of sound mind. Something nagged at me, something about the house itself. We'd bought this place in 1995, right after Scott was born. Kathleen had inherited $20,000 from her grandmother, enough for the down payment. She'd handled all the paperwork herself while I was working 70-hour weeks at the engineering firm. What name had she used on the deed? I knocked on Frank's door. He was watching baseball. Frank, I need to get into my house. There are documents I need to see. Demetrio, they'll call the cops. They're at dinner in Cherry Creek. I saw it on Patricia's Facebook. I'd checked obsessively, trying to understand what was happening. Please, I just need 20 minutes. Frank studied me for a long moment. Then he grabbed his keys. 11:30 p.m. to 1247 Niage View Drive. We parked down the street. The house was dark. Frank kept the engine running while I used my key at the back door. The house felt wrong. In one day, they'd started erasing us. Kathleen's herb garden, ripped out, family photos gone from the mantel, new curtains in the living room. I went straight to Kathleen's office, the filing cabinet where she'd kept everything important for 29 years. Found the folder marked House, 1995. Inside, the original deed of trust, recorded October 15th, 1995. Owner, Kathleen Morrison. Not Kathleen Thomas, not Kathleen Morrison Thomas, Kathleen Morrison. Her maiden name. And no mention of me at all. My phone buzzed. Frank. Car and driveway, get out now. I shoved the deed in my jacket and ran. I sat in the dark, staring at the deed. If Kathleen had put the house in her name alone, her maiden name before we were even married, then legally it had been hers to leave to anyone. The will was real. Richard wasn't lying about that. But why? Why had Kathleen bought the house in her name only? Why hadn't she told me? And why, with her dying breath, had she tried to tell me about important documents? My phone rang. Scott. Dad. My son's voice was tight. I just talked to Courtney. She said you're not at the house anymore. What the hell is going on? I told him everything. The eviction, the will, the deed. Courtney's guilt and fear, how she'd changed over the 6 years since marrying Kyle. Scott was silent for a long moment. Dad, he finally said, do you remember Mom talking about a storage unit? What? Last time I visited back in January, Mom mentioned she'd rented one in Lakewood. She said she was putting things there for safekeeping, important things. She made me promise not to tell anyone, not even you. My hand tightened on the phone. Did she say what was in it? No, but she gave me a key. He paused. She said if anything happened to her, I should make sure you got it. Dad, I'm coming home tomorrow, first thing, and we're going to that storage unit. After he hung up, I sat in the dark and thought about my wife. Kathleen had known she was sick. Her heart had been failing for months. She'd had time to plan, to prepare. She'd rented a storage unit in secret, put things there she didn't want anyone to find until after she was gone. She'd bought our house in her maiden name 30 years ago, keeping some measure of independence I'd never questioned. She'd tried to tell me something with her last words. Important documents. And suddenly, for the first time since Courtney had stood on my porch and told me I didn't belong in my own home, I felt something other than grief and confusion. I felt hope, because Kathleen Morrison Thomas had been the smartest person I'd ever known. She'd spent 35 years as a librarian, helping people find answers, solving problems, researching the truth. If she'd hidden something, she'd done it for a reason. And whatever was in that storage unit, I had a feeling it was going to change everything. Scott's Honda pulled into the parking lot of Secure Storage Lakewood at 9 sharp. My son looked like he hadn't slept, rumpled shirt, dark circles under his eyes. He'd driven 3 hours from Boulder in the dark. You okay? He asked, though he looked worse than I felt. No, you? No. He managed a tired smile. But let's see what Mom left us. The facility sat between a tire shop and a Mexican restaurant, rows of orange metal units stretching back from the street. The morning air smelled like exhaust and last night's carnitas. Scott pulled a small key from his wallet. Unit 247. She paid for a year in advance, in cash. Cash? That's what the receipt said. Mom was being careful, Dad. We found the unit on the second floor. Scott's hand shook as he fitted the key into the padlock. The lock clicked open. He pulled up the rolling door. Inside was a 10x10 space. Just 3 things: a filing cabinet and 2 cardboard boxes. One box was labeled legal documents in Kathleen's precise handwriting. The other was labeled art supplies. Mom didn't do art, Scott said quietly. I know. We stared at the boxes for a moment. Then I opened the filing cabinet. The top drawer was organized with Kathleen's meticulous precision. Everything in labeled folders, alphabetically arranged. The first folder, House, Original Deed. I pulled it out with trembling hands. Inside was a copy of the same deed I'd found last night. Kathleen Morrison, sole owner, October 15, 1995. But there was more. A sticky note in Kathleen's handwriting. I bought this house before we married, kept it in my name to protect it from creditors if your business ever failed. I never told you because I didn't want you to feel like I didn't trust you. I'm sorry, my love, but it means the house is mine to protect. Kay. She was protecting you, Scott said, reading over my shoulder, even 30 years ago. The next folder was marked Will and Trust, 2024. I pulled out the documents. The first was a will, dated March 1st, 2024, 6 weeks before Kathleen died. It was notarized, official, and completely different from the will Richard had shown me. I, Kathleen Morrison Thomas, being of sound mind and body, do hereby bequeath all my worldly possessions to my beloved husband, Demetrio Thomas. The house at 1247 Ridgeview Drive, all savings accounts, my vehicle, and personal effects shall pass to him upon my death. My children, Scott and Courtney, shall inherit equally after Demetrio's passing. Dad, Scott's voice was shaking. He held up another document. Look at this. It was a trust agreement. Irrevocable trust established March 1st, 2024. Grantor, Kathleen Morrison Thomas, trustee, Howard Klein, Esquire, beneficiary, Demetrio Thomas. I scanned the legal language, my engineering brain trying to make sense of lawyer speak. Kathleen had placed the house into an irrevocable trust. Howard Klein, a lawyer I'd never heard of, was the trustee. Upon Kathleen's death, the house would be protected for my use for the remainder of my life. Scott and Courtney would inherit after I passed, but they could not force a sale or remove me. It was airtight, legal, dated 6 weeks before her death. Who the hell is Howard Klein? I asked. Scott was already searching on his phone. Law office in downtown Denver, estate planning specialist. He looked up. Dad, if this trust is real, then Richard's will is either a forgery or it's invalid. The trust supersedes everything. Why wouldn't she tell me? Scott pulled out another paper from the folder. Maybe she was scared. It was a letter, handwritten on Kathleen's library stationery. My dearest Demetrio, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and I pray you found this before it was too late. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you everything. There wasn't time and I was afraid. Richard Brennan is dangerous. He's drowning in debt. His entire real estate empire is collapsing. He needs money desperately. Our house is worth nearly $1 million now. He wants it. Courtney is trapped. I've tried to reach her, but Richard and Kyle have isolated her completely. Whatever you think of what she's done, remember, she's being controlled. She's terrified. She's still our daughter. I've made arrangements. The house is protected in an irrevocable trust through Howard Klein. He's a good man. We served on the library foundation board together for 20 years. He knows everything. Call him. He'll help you fight back. There's more evidence. Check the second box. The password is our foundation, 1961. Protect our children, my love, especially Courtney. Forever yours, Kathleen. I couldn't breathe. Scott put his arm around my shoulders. She knew, I whispered. She knew what Richard was planning. What's in the second box? Scott asked. We turned to the box labeled Art Supplies. I cut through the packing tape with my keys. Inside, carefully wrapped in bubble wrap, were 4 small wireless cameras, the kind you'd use for home security. Beneath them, receipts from an electronics store dated February 28, 2024. Installation instructions, a portable hard drive, and another letter. Thomas, I installed cameras in the house. 4 of them. Living room, inside the antique mantel clock. Kitchen, behind the Julia Child cookbook on the shelf. Hallway, in the smoke detector. My office, inside the red dictionary, the fake one we got as a joke. They've been recording since March 10th. Everything is backed up to a cloud account. The account automatically saves footage every night. The password is in the trust name. You'll figure it out. You always do. Watch the videos, my love, all of them, and then do what needs to be done. Protect our children. K. Our foundation. 1961, I said. The trust is called Our Foundation Trust. She's talking about 1961. The year you met? Scott asked. We didn't start dating until 1990, but we first met in 1961. We were both 4 years old. Our mothers were friends. Kathleen used to joke we'd been destined since we were in diapers. Scott pulled out his laptop, connecting to the storage facility's Wi-Fi. His fingers flew across the keyboard. He typed in an email address from one of the receipts. Kathleen.backup.1961@securemail.com. Password: Our Foundation 1961. The screen loaded. A folder appeared. Home Security, March to June 2024. Inside were 23 video files, each one labeled with a date and location. The earliest was dated March 10th, 2024. The most recent was June 6th, 2024. Yesterday, the day before they'd thrown me out. 23 videos, Scott breathed. Mom recorded everything. I clicked on the first file. March 10th, 2024. Living room, 10:30 a.m. The video opened. The angle was high. Kathleen must have hidden the camera on the top shelf of the bookshelf, inside that antique clock. The quality was surprisingly good, clear and sharp. I could see our living room. The couch Kathleen had picked out 10 years ago, the coffee table, the window overlooking the front yard, and Richard Brennan standing in the middle of my living room, alone. I felt Scott tense beside me. Richard was on his phone, walking around slowly, examining things. He picked up a photo of Kathleen and me from our anniversary, studied it, set it down. He went to Kathleen's office door and tried the handle, locked. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. The audio was muffled, but we could hear him. "Yeah, I'm at the house. No, the old man's at work. The place is worth at least $850, maybe $900 if we're lucky." My blood went cold. "Don't worry about the wife. She's not going to be a problem much longer. Yeah, heart failure. Doctor said maybe 6 months. Once she's gone, we move fast." Scott grabbed my arm. Richard walked to the mantel, looking at Kathleen's photo, the same spot where her urn would rest 2 months later. "This house is going to save us. $3.2 million in debt, and this property is our way out. The old man won't even see it coming." He hung up and left. The video ended. Scott and I sat in complete silence. The storage unit felt too small, too airless. "He planned it," Scott finally said. "Even before Mom died, he was planning to take the house." She knew. I thought about Kathleen installing cameras while I was at work, hiding them, setting up cloud backup, all while her heart was failing. She knew what he was planning, and she recorded it. Scott was already scrolling through the other files. "Dad, look at the dates. There are videos from late March all through April." He stopped, his face going white. April 18th, the day before Mom died. Howard Klein agreed to meet us that afternoon. His office was in a restored Victorian in downtown Denver, lined with law books and framed diplomas. He was in his late 60s, white hair, sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. When we walked in, he stood immediately. "Demetrio Thomas, I've been waiting for this call." "You knew my wife?" "For 20 years. We served on the Library Foundation Board together. Kathleen was brilliant, one of the smartest people I've ever known." His expression softened. "When she came to me in February, she was frightened. She said her family was in danger." "Why didn't she tell me?" Howard gestured for us to sit. "She was worried about your reaction. She believed Richard had people watching the family. If you'd suddenly started moving assets, it would have raised red flags. She needed to work in secret. The will Richard showed me is either a forgery or was signed under duress. The irrevocable trust supersedes any will. The house legally belongs to the trust with you as beneficiary. Richard has no claim whatsoever." Relief flooded through me. "So I can go home?" "Not yet. We'll need to file paperwork with the court, present the trust documents, likely get a restraining order. It will take a few days. But yes, Demetrio, that house is yours. Kathleen made absolutely certain of it." Scott leaned forward. "What about Courtney? Can Richard be charged with elder abuse?" "Possibly. If we can prove Courtney was forced to participate under duress, she could be granted immunity for testimony." Howard looked at me carefully. "But that depends on whether Courtney is willing to come forward." "She's terrified of them," I said. "Then we need to give her a reason to be more afraid of staying silent." Howard pulled out a legal pad. "Tell me everything." We spent an hour walking through it all. The eviction, Richard's threats, the deed, the trust, the videos. When we got to the videos, Howard sat forward. "You have recordings of Richard in your house, planning this?" 23 files. We've only watched one so far, but Kathleen said to watch all of them." "Do it, tonight. Watch every single one." Howard's voice was intense. "And call me immediately if there's anything at all, that suggests criminal activity beyond fraud." Scott and I sat up until 2 in the morning, watching videos. March 12th, Richard alone in the house again, going through Kathleen's medicine cabinet. March 15th, Richard in Kathleen's office. This one made us both freeze. The camera angle showed Kathleen's desk. Richard was sitting there, using her laptop. We watched as he typed into a search engine. Scott paused the video and zoomed in on the screen. The search query was visible. Digoxin overdose symptoms. Below it, foxglove poisoning, cardiac arrest. And how to induce heart failure naturally. But the resolution wasn't perfect. We could see he'd searched something medical, something about heart problems, but a defense lawyer could argue the screen wasn't clear enough to prove exactly what. "We need more," Scott said. We kept watching. March 28th, Courtney visiting for lunch. We watched our daughter sit at the kitchen table with her mother, crying, while Kathleen tried to reach her. Watched Kyle call, and Courtney's whole demeanor change, becoming fake, bright, afraid. April 3rd, Richard and Kyle together in the living room, discussing something we couldn't quite hear. April 10th, the date of Richard's fake will, but no video of him forging anything. Kathleen's cameras hadn't caught that. Then we got to April 18th, 11:47 p.m. living room. Scott's hand hovered over the trackpad. "Dad, are you ready?" The night before Kathleen died, whatever was on this video, it was the key to everything. "Play it," I said. The video loaded. Our living room, dimly lit. 3 people sat on the couch, Richard, Kyle, and Patricia, in my house, the night before my wife died. "Is she asleep?" That was Patricia's voice. "Took the pills 20 minutes ago." Kyle. "Should be out for hours." "Good." Richard leaned back, looking satisfied. "The digoxin is already in her system. By tomorrow night, she'll be gone." I couldn't breathe. Patricia's voice, nervous. "Are you sure this can't be traced?" "I've been putting it in her sleeping pills for 3 weeks. Slow accumulation. In someone with heart failure, it'll look completely natural. They won't even test for it." The room spun around me. Scott grabbed my arm. "What about Demetrio?" Kyle asked. "The old man won't know a thing. Heart failure, natural causes. Once she's dead, we wait a few weeks for the grief to settle, then we move on the house. Courtney's already signed the paperwork." "She's having second thoughts," Kyle said. "Then you remind her what happens if she doesn't cooperate. We're $3.2 million in debt, Kyle. This house is our only way out. Your wife will do what she's told, or she'll lose everything too, including you." Patricia stood up, pacing. "I still think this is too risky, Richard." "It's done, Patricia." Richard stood, straightening his jacket. "Kathleen Gardner took her sleeping pills with a little extra help tonight. By tomorrow, she'll be gone, and no one will ever know. Now let's get out of here before the old man comes home from the hospital." They walked out of frame. A door closed softly. The video continued for another minute, just an empty living room. Then it ended. Scott and I sat in absolute silence. "They killed her," Scott finally whispered. "They murdered Mom." My hands were shaking so badly I had to clasp them together. "Digoxin," he said, "digoxin. We have to call the police, right now." "Wait." I was thinking like an engineer, trying to see the problems. "Look at the video quality. Can you see their faces clearly?" Scott rewound it. The living room was dim. We could see 3 figures, hear their voices clearly, but facial features weren't perfectly distinct. "A lawyer could argue it's not clear who's speaking," I said slowly. "That voices can be faked. We need more." "More?" Scott's voice rose. "Dad, they confessed to murder." "I know. But we need evidence that will hold up in court. Medical evidence. We need to prove there was actually digoxin in your mother's body." Scott went pale. "Mom was cremated." "No." I remembered suddenly. "No, she wasn't. Courtney insisted on burial. She said Mom would want to be in the ground, not scattered. At the time I thought it was grief talking, but now—" "Mom told her, in the hospital. Whatever Mom said to Courtney in private, she told her to make sure she was buried, not cremated." "So there would be evidence," I finished. "Even from beyond the grave, your mother was thinking 3 steps ahead." Scott looked at me with something like awe. "What do we do?" "We call Howard Klein, and then we call the police." But when we tried to open the rest of the video files, we hit a problem. 7 of the 23 files were corrupted. damaged, wouldn't open, and the one labeled April 19th, 2024, 3:47 a.m., the exact time Kathleen died, was one of them. No, Scott breathed, trying again and again. No, this is the most important one. I thought about Kathleen, sick and dying, setting up these cameras, backing up files while her heart failed. Of course, some of them would have problems. We'll find a way to recover them, I said. We have to. Because somewhere in those corrupted files might be the final piece of evidence we needed. The piece that would prove, beyond any doubt, that Richard Brennan had murdered my wife. June 9th. Howard Klein knew someone who specialized in digital forensics. Vincent Torres ran a small office in Capitol Hill, walls covered with disassembled hard drives and FBI certifications. Your wife was smart, Vincent said, examining the corrupted files. Cloud backup, multiple redundancies, encrypted folders. She knew what she was doing. Can you recover them? Scott asked. Maybe, probably. Give me 48 hours. We didn't have 48 hours to waste. While Vincent worked, Howard filed emergency motions with the court, and I made the call I'd been dreading. Detective Laura Martinez agreed to meet us that afternoon. Denver Police Department, 3 p.m. Detective Martinez was in her mid-40s, sharp-eyed, with the kind of stillness that came from years of interviewing liars. She listened to our story without interrupting, took notes in a precise hand. When we finished, she sat back. Show me the video. We played April 18th, the three figures on the couch, Richard's voice. The digoxin is already in her system. By tomorrow night, she'll be gone. Martinez watched it twice. Then she looked at us with an expression I couldn't read. This is conspiracy to commit murder, she said quietly. But we have a problem. My stomach sank. What problem? Defense will argue the video quality isn't sufficient for positive ID. The voices could be anyone. Deep fakes are a real thing now. She held up her hand before I could protest. I believe you. I believe this is Richard Brennan on this video. But I need more for an arrest warrant. I need medical evidence and I need Courtney's testimony. Kathleen was buried, I said. We can test for digoxin. I'll need to get an exhumation order. With cause of death listed as natural, that requires court approval, and a damn good reason. She looked at Howard. Can you help with that? I can try, but it'll take time. How much time? Scott asked. Martinez and Howard exchanged a look. 2 weeks minimum, Howard said. We don't have 2 weeks. I pulled out my phone, showed them the email I'd received that morning. Richard filed paperwork to sell the house. Closing date is June 22nd, 10 days from now. Martinez swore softly. Once that house changes hands, the legal battle becomes exponentially more complicated. So what do we do? I asked. Martinez leaned forward. We make them confess, in person, on record, with witnesses. Over the next 3 days, pieces fell into place. Vincent Torres called on June 11th. I recovered 5 of the 7 corrupted files, but the one from April 19th at 3:47 a.m., the exact time your wife died, it's too damaged. Whatever happened, we can't see it. My heart sank. But at least we had the April 18th confession. Howard pulled strings with a judge he'd known for 30 years. The exhumation order came through on June 12th, expedited based on credible evidence of foul play. They exhumed Kathleen's body on June 13th. Dr. Rebecca Walsh, Kathleen's cardiologist, had kept meticulous notes. I documented several unexplained symptoms in her final weeks, she told Martinez. Nausea, visual disturbances, confusion. I thought it was side effects from her heart medications, but something felt off. I'd planned to run additional tests, but she died before I could. Those notes, combined with the video evidence, gave the medical examiner cause to run specific toxicology tests. The results came back on June 14th. Martinez called me directly. Digoxin levels, 4.2 nanograms per milliliter. Therapeutic range is 0.5 to 2.0. Anything above 2.0 is toxic. 4.2 is lethal. I closed my eyes. So it's murder. It's murder. Deliberate, prolonged poisoning over 3 to 4 weeks, exactly like Richard said on the video. Her voice was hard. But I still need his confession on record, and I need Courtney's testimony about the coercion. We have one shot at this, Demetrio. We can't screw it up. That's when Howard told us about the party. Patricia's been telling everyone in their social circle that they're celebrating their new home, he said. June 21st, housewarming party. She's invited half of Denver's wealthy elite. Richard's arrogant, Martinez said. He thinks he's won. He's going to gloat. She looked at me. You were invited, weren't you? I checked my email. Sure enough, buried in spam, a cream-colored digital invitation. Richard and Patricia Brennan cordially invite you to celebrate new beginnings. Saturday, June 21st, 7 p.m., 1247 Ridgeview Drive. My address, my house. They were throwing a victory party. Perfect, Martinez said with a cold smile. Here's what we're going to do. June 21st, 6:30 p.m. Vincent Torres arrived at the house at 5 p.m., hired as the AV technician to set up equipment for a slideshow. What he actually installed were wireless cameras and microphones in every room, all with proper warrants. Martinez and 2 plainclothes officers would attend as guests. She'd gotten friendly with Patricia at a charity gala years ago, and I would wear a wire. Your job is to get Richard talking, Martinez explained in her car outside Frank's house. Not about the house, about Kathleen, about her death. Make him angry, make him defensive, make him want to prove how smart he is. She fitted the wire under my shirt. Everything he says will be recorded. But the real goal is to get him to confess in front of witnesses. 40 people hearing him admit to murder, that's a prosecutor's dream. What about Courtney? I asked. Scott's been in contact with her through Instagram. She knows something's happening tonight. She'll be there. Martinez met my eyes. When Richard goes down, we extract her. We offer immunity for testimony. We get her out. I put on the suit Kathleen had bought me for our 30th anniversary. Navy blue, slightly tight now. Scott straightened my tie. You ready, Dad? I thought about Kathleen installing cameras while dying, about her meticulous planning, her courage, her determination to protect us even from beyond the grave. Let's finish what your mother started, I said. 1247 Ridgeview Drive, 7:15 p.m. We arrived fashionably late. Cars lined Ridgeview Drive, Mercedes, BMWs, Teslas. Through the windows, I could see people mingling in my living room, drinking wine, laughing. They'd redecorated everything. New furniture, new curtains, new art. 30 years of Kathleen and me, erased in 2 weeks. Howard Klein met us at the door. Martinez is inside with her team. Vincent has all equipment running. The whole house is wired. He straightened his tie. Let's go get your house back. We walked in together. The room went quiet. 40 faces turned toward us. Richard was at the fireplace, where Kathleen's urn had sat during the wake, holding a scotch. For a split second, his face went pale. Then he recovered, plastering on his closing deal smile. Demetrio! He crossed the room, hand extended. What a surprise. I didn't think you'd come. You invited me. I didn't shake his hand. To my own house. Nervous laughter from the guests. Richard's smile tightened. Patricia appeared at his side, diamonds glittering at her throat. Demetrio, how unexpected. And you brought your lawyer. How formal. Mr. Brennan. Howard's voice cut through the murmur of conversation. We have some legal matters to discuss. This is a party, hardly the place. It's exactly the place, I said. Richard's eyes flicked to the crowd. He was trapped, couldn't throw us out in front of Denver society without looking guilty. Fine, he raised his voice. Everyone, can I have your attention? The conversations died. I saw Courtney in the corner, half hidden behind Kyle. She looked skeletal, terrified. Our eyes met. I tried to communicate. It's okay. We're here to save you. Richard raised his glass. I want to thank you all for coming tonight to celebrate new beginnings. This house represents everything my family has worked for. Let's talk about this house, Richard, I interrupted. Let's talk about who really owns it. The room was dead silent. Kathleen left it to Courtney in her will, Richard said smoothly. Everything was legal and proper, was it? Howard pulled documents from his briefcase, because I have a different will, dated March 1st, 2024. Notarized, legally filed, leaving everything to Demetrio Thomas. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I also have an irrevocable trust, Howard continued, placing this house under protection for Demetrio's lifetime use. Kathleen Morrison Thomas created this trust specifically to protect her husband. Your will, Mr. Brennan, is either a forgery or was signed under extreme duress. Richard's face flushed red. This is absurd, is it? I pulled out my phone, pulled up the video from March 10th. Then maybe you can explain this. I held the phone up. On the screen, Richard walked through my living room, talking on his phone. The place is worth at least $850. Don't worry about the wife. She's not going to be a problem much longer. The room erupted. People pushing closer to see, phones coming out to record. That's taken out of context, Richard sputtered. Context. I felt rage bubbling up. You were in my house, planning to steal it while my wife was dying. Your wife had 6 months to live. You were just what? Martinez stepped forward from the crowd, badge out. Planning ahead? Let's talk about planning, Mr. Brennan. She nodded to Vincent. Suddenly, the video was on the living room wall, projected large. March 10th playing for everyone to see. Then, March 15th, Richard in Kathleen's office searching digoxin overdose symptoms. I was researching for a book. Richard was sweating now. Really? I said. Then explain April 18th. Vincent switched videos. The living room went completely silent as April 18th played. 3 figures on the couch, Richard's voice crystal clear. The digoxin is already in her system. By tomorrow night, she'll be gone. Patricia, are you sure this can't be traced? Richard, I've been putting it in her sleeping pills for 3 weeks. In someone with heart failure, it'll look completely natural. Someone in the crowd screamed. Others started shouting. Patricia went white as a sheet. Richard lunged for this projector. Turn that off. This is... Martinez grabbed his arm. Richard Brennan, stop right there. You can't prove anything, Richard shouted. Voices can be faked. Video can be edited. This is all... Actually, Martinez said coldly, we can prove everything. We exhumed Kathleen Gardner's body 6 days ago. Toxicology results came back positive for digoxin, lethal levels, 4.2 nanograms per milliliter. Richard froze. Just like you said on the video, slow accumulation over 3 weeks. In someone with heart failure, it looked completely natural. Martinez pulled out handcuffs. Except Kathleen was smarter than you. She installed cameras. She gathered evidence. She documented her own murder to make sure you'd pay for it. No. Richard's voice cracked. I didn't. You don't understand. 3.2 million in debt. I had no choice. You had a choice. My voice was shaking. You chose to murder my wife for money. 2 uniformed officers burst through the door. Martinez nodded to them. Richard Brennan, you're under arrest for the murder of Kathleen Morrison Thomas. They moved toward him. Richard tried to run, actually tried to bolt for the back door. An officer caught him easily, slamming him against the wall. Conspiracy to commit murder, elder abuse, fraud, extortion, Martinez continued. You have the right to remain silent. Kyle tried to slip away. The second officer blocked his path. Kyle Brennan, you're under arrest as an accessory to murder. I didn't know. Kyle's voice rose to a scream. Dad said it was just about the house. He said, you're on video, Martinez said flatly. April 18th, discussing her death before it happened. That's conspiracy. Patricia collapsed onto the couch, sobbing, and then Courtney moved. She'd been frozen in the corner the whole time. Now she stumbled forward, her legs giving out halfway across the room. I caught her before she hit the ground. Dad, she sobbed into my shoulder. Dad, I'm so sorry. I didn't know about Mom. I swear to God I didn't know they killed her. I thought she just died. I know, sweetheart. I held her tight. I know you didn't know. They said if I didn't sign the papers, Kyle would go to prison, that I'd lose my CPA license, that we'd lose everything. Shh, you're safe now. They can't hurt you anymore. Scott joined us, wrapping his arms around both of us. My children, Kathleen's children, finally together again. Behind us, Richard was being dragged out in handcuffs, still shouting. This isn't over. My lawyers will tear you apart. You can't prove... Actually, Martinez called after him, we can. Every word you said tonight was recorded. Wiretap, warrant approved. Plus 40 witnesses heard you confess to murder. She smiled coldly. You did our job for us, Mr. Brennan. Arrogance always does. 3 months later, September 15th, courthouse. The trial lasted 2 weeks. The prosecution presented all 23 videos. Dr. Walsh testified about Kathleen's mysterious symptoms. The medical examiner explained digoxin poisoning in detail. Courtney took the stand on day 8. She was fragile, but steady, telling the jury about 6 years of coercive control, how Richard had isolated her, how he'd threatened Kyle's freedom to force her compliance, how she'd been terrified and trapped. "I loved my mother," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I would never have betrayed my father if I'd had any choice. Richard Brennan destroyed my marriage, destroyed my relationship with my family, and murdered my mother. The only thing he didn't destroy was the truth, because my mother was smarter than him." The jury deliberated 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Richard Brennan, 35 years, no parole for 25. Kyle Brennan, 18 years, no parole for 12. Patricia took a plea deal, 5 years probation, full testimony against Richard and Kyle. June 2026, 2 years later. I stood in front of the Kathleen Morrison Thomas Foundation, looking up at bronze letters catching the morning sun. The foundation occupied a renovated community center in downtown Denver, free legal help for elder abuse survivors, temporary housing, financial counseling, a 24-hour hotline, 1-800-677-1116. Courtney appeared beside me, professional in a navy suit, carrying materials for the opening ceremony. "Ready, Dad?" I looked at my daughter. 2 years of therapy, 2 years of healing. She'd rebuilt herself, become a forensic accountant specializing in financial abuse cases. She'd testified at 6 other trials, helping convict abusers. "Mom would be proud," I said. "She saved us all." Courtney looked at the building. "Now we honor her by saving others." Inside, the main room was packed. Howard Klein, Detective Martinez, Frank and Martha Cooper. Scott near the front. He'd become education director, running workshops on recognizing financial exploitation. And survivors, dozens of them, people who'd escaped situations like ours. At 10 o'clock, Courtney stepped to the podium. "Good morning, I'm Courtney Thomas, executive director. 2 years ago, I stood in my father's living room and watched videos my mother had recorded, knowing she was dying, videos that exposed a murder conspiracy and saved my family." She outlined the foundation's services: legal aid, safe housing, financial planning, support groups. If you're being threatened, manipulated, or coerced by family members, you don't have to fight alone. We're here. We understand. We'll help you find your way home. When she finished, she introduced me. I walked to the podium with Kathleen's photo beside me, her official library portrait, smiling, confident, brilliant. "My wife knew she was dying," I began. Most people would focus on saying goodbye. Kathleen did something different. She installed cameras. She gathered evidence. She built legal protections. She documented her own murder to make sure her family would survive. I looked around the room. She did this because she refused to let evil win. This foundation is her final gift, not just to our family, but to every family facing what we faced. Today, we open these doors in her name, and we promise to fight for every person who walks through them. The applause was thunderous. After the ceremony, an elderly woman approached Courtney, 70 maybe, frail and nervous. "My son wants to sell my house and put me in a nursing home," she said quietly, "but it's my home. I don't want to leave." Courtney took her hands. "What's your name?" "Eleanor." "Eleanor, you're not alone anymore." Courtney's eyes were fierce, the same look Kathleen used to get. "We're going to help you, I promise." Eleanor started to cry. Courtney pulled her into a hug while Scott brought paperwork. I watched my daughter begin the work her mother had started. The fight wasn't over. It would never be over. But because of Kathleen Morrison Thomas, because of her courage, her intelligence, her refusal to go quietly, no one had to fight alone anymore. I walked to the cemetery that evening, placed sunflowers on Kathleen's grave. "We did it, sweetheart," I whispered. "The foundation is open. Courtney is thriving. Scott is helping educate people. Richard is in prison for 25 years. You saved us all." The wind picked up, rustling through pine trees, carrying the scent of flowers and summer. I smiled through my tears. "Thank you, my love, for everything, for the cameras, for the evidence, for never giving up, even when you knew you were dying. You protected us to the very end." I touched the headstone, gray granite, simple words. Kathleen Morrison Thomas, 1965 to 2024. She loved fiercely and protected fearlessly. "You're still protecting people," I said softly. "Every day." Through the foundation, through Courtney, through every survivor we help, your love didn't end with death. It became something greater. I sat there until sunset, talking to my wife, feeling her presence in the cooling air. Kathleen was gone. But her legacy, her courage, her planning, her determination to protect the innocent, that would live forever. And every person the foundation helped, every family we saved, every abuser we stopped, that was Kathleen, still fighting, still winning, still refusing to let evil triumph, even from beyond the grave.